Hi everybody, I'm Geraldo Rivera. Welcome to my home on the Hudson River opposite Manhattan. This is my brother Craig, my sidekick and partner in crime. As you see us traveling around the world from the various war zones to the hurricane scenes to the notorious crimes or whatever, my brother, generally speaking, has been shoulder to shoulder with me. You're here because I am live signing my new memoir. I've just published it. Today is the publication date of the Geraldo Show, a memoir. This is a picture of me in Tora Bora, Afghanistan. This was the Al-Qaeda, the terror group's last stand in Afghanistan. You know, 9/11 happened not far from here. In fact, in another room in this house, you can see the World Trade Center. The attacks on the Trade Center started the war on terror. It affected me in a very grievous and personal way. So many of our friends and neighbors were killed on 9/11. It infuriated me, so much so that I wanted very much to leave my desk job not far from here in Fort Lee, New Jersey at CNBC and become a war correspondent. The problem was my boss at NBC said, no, your program, Rivera Live on CNBC, was the #1 rated program. They didn't want to let me go. But I was so infuriated by the attacks of 9/11 that I felt the need to go and get the people who did this to us. So I quit that cushy desk job and I went to work for less than half the money on Fox News, where I became the war correspondent, or one of the senior war correspondents at the then young Fox News network. This book tells that story, and it also tells several other very important storylines. One is my relationship with the man, my hangout buddy, who later became the 45th president of the United States, President Donald Trump. So I tell the story of our relationship and how my friendship with President Trump has, if you saw the Roseanne show, a couple of weeks ago, her premiere episode, you could see in Roseanne's family, Roseanne loved the president and her sister hates the president. That's the tension. That tension exists in millions of American families, including my own. Craig knows that my wife, Erica, really doesn't like the president. She can't divorce his policies from the person. I can. Working at Fox News has made me very tolerant of points of view that are different than my own. So I can be friends with the president and still disagree with his policies. That lesson, the lesson of compromise, the lesson of conciliation, the lesson that, we're all in this together. We only get one president at a time. Let's root for his success rather than his failure, is an important part of this book as well. So I'm live signing. Just let us know. Just send in your name, or not your name, just let me know. How do you do it?
So you buy the book.
You buy the book.
At geraldoshow.com. And in buying the book, then you could submit your questions, and I'll be able to read these questions live on Facebook right now, or whatever live stream you're getting.
So it's geraldoshowbook.com. That's geraldoshowbook.com. You buy the book, ask the question. Craig will even mention your name as your question comes in. So I'm going to start signing, and Craig, you give me the questions as they come.
Well, I'm just going to go back to what you said about the presidency dividing families. I have the same situation in my family where my wife and I are polar opposites, and I'm kind of moderate in my feelings toward President Trump, but she is dead set against it. So there've been many fights that haven't been settled yet. But we'll start with the question that a lot of people are asking is, what made you decide to write the memoir at this point in your life?
geraldoshowbook.com. I'm 48 years in the news business. 48 years is a long time, a half century. I'm 74 years old now. I don't know, at what point my streak runs out. I wanted to put it all down in black and white so there was a record of what I did. I don't want some snotty obituary writer at the New York Times or at Wikipedia to define my half century in American public life. I want to do it myself. That's what this book does. It tells the story, obviously, from my point of view. There are stories of war and peace, other horror of a different level.
Who knew what would happen? It
Oh
was
my God,
frightening.
it's just horrible.
So here's another question. You're one of the few, if not the only, talk show hosts to go head-to-head with racial extremists. Do you think today's host should take a page from your book in the 80s? Or are people too afraid of the violence, i.e. broken noses, that comes with that content?
Well, you know, I like to joke that on my tombstone will be engraved, he opened Al Capone's vaults and it was empty, or, you know, he got his nose broken in the most famous studio brawl in history, captured on tape. That incident, when I did that talk show, I can't say honestly that I didn't expect some trouble. The skinheads, the racist skinheads, had been kind of swaggering around, doing some local programs and intimidating the hosts with their racist lingo. I vowed that I was not going to be like the hosts, the milquetoast hosts who back down. So I wore my combat boots to the taping of the show. I didn't expect it to come down the way it did, where you know, I got hit in the face by a chair thrown in the first minutes of the brawl. But if you look at the tape, and it's available on Geraldo.com, and the internet is full of it, you see that once I take the whack. We still have the chair. We have it downstairs in my garage. We saved it. Once I get hit, I find the guy who threw it, and I go for him. And there's a real, you know, a real brawl. It's like a gang fight almost. My lesson.
It's also on Geraldo.com, and Geraldo.com is another place you can find a link to this live signing and a way to buy the book. GeraldoShowBook.com.
Okay, but the title is The Geraldo Show. To get the link to buy the book now, GeraldoShowBook.com is the, you don't use the, so it's GeraldoShowBook.com. That brawl, you know, I'll tell you a little secret. I don't know if I've ever said this publicly, but, you know, I had to get my nose was broken because the chair whacked me. It was one of those metal frame chairs, whacked me. When I was at the doctor, though, I said, you know, my producer, Marty Berman, said, hey, as long as you're in there, why don't you trim it down a little bit? My nose was about this big before I got hit by the chair. So my nose got a bit of a tune-up, thanks to the skinheads.
Who could forget the cover of Newsweek magazine with your heavily bandaged nose? Some artists actually depicted that in their art.
No, that's a real picture.
Moment.
Newsweek is a real photograph, but what I remember is Trash TV was the headline on Newsweek magazine. In other words, I became the symbol of Trash TV. You know, it's funny. I was also on the cover of Playgirl that same year. I think it was 1988, 1989. So I got two very different covers from that broken nose incident. But you know, it's funny how
not the last fight with skinheads.
It wasn't the last fight with skinheads. And I was arrested in Janesville, Wisconsin, another brawl with skinheads. They had a neo-Nazi a hate mongers summit in Janesville, which is the hometown of Paul Ryan, the Speaker of the House of Representatives, and they faced off against some racist protesters, and one of them just said to me, Geraldo, I'm sick of your bull crap. You spick, you dirty Jew. What are you anyway? You know, he couldn't decide whether he wanted to insult my Puerto Rican side or my Jewish side. But once he threw something at me, once he hit me, I could hit him back without getting arrested. Of course, I was arrested anyway. I was bailed out. I'll tell you a funny story about that. You're talking about Muhammad Ali. I flew from Rockville, Illinois, to Chicago to catch my flight to New York after I got out of jail for that brawl in 1992. By chance, Muhammad Ali was on that flight. Rockford, Illinois. Muhammad Ali was on that flight. So the champ says to me, I got a bone to pick with you. I said, what is it, champ? didn't I tell you to lead with the left? You never
right.
lead with the right. You lead with the left.
That's right.
You know, because the video of that brawl showed me.
He did turn.
My first shot was like a big overhand to the.
Took about 5 minutes to land.
No, I landed pretty well. And then we.
All right. Well, here's an
scrapped it.
interesting question.
Okay.
I know this is cliche, but what would you tell your 20-year-old self?
I mean, it's a cliche, but it's a great and provocative question. When I was 20 years old, let's see, where was I? In law school, I guess. No, was I in law school? 20 years old, it would be 1963. No, still in college, still in the University of Arizona. In fact, I got married shortly after that. I was barely 21 years old when I got married. I guess if I was looking back on my 20-year-old self, I would say it would be definitely don't get married that young. Don't get married at 20 years old. I mean, that's why I've had so many marriages. My first 3 lasted a year apiece. I got married, was very, very young, and I didn't know what I was doing, but I did know in my day, and this is one of the reasons I became a daring war reporter. I wanted to prove to people that I didn't not go to Vietnam during my day because I was afraid. I didn't go to Vietnam because I opposed the war in Vietnam and Laos and Cambodia in those days. But one of the reasons I got married so young is in those days, marriage in that year, 1965, was still a deferment from the draft. The draft was the law of the land in those days. So I got married, and I then moved back to New York. I was selling clothing in Alexander's department store, ladies' cottons, 99-cent ladies' cottons in the basement of Alexander's department store. And our dad had a diner on Long Island, and I was the nighttime cook, short order cook in my dad's diner. But having been married, it's like crazy. You don't know who you are yet. One of the reasons I'm for, and I'm sure that many of you are not, or just would not agree with me, but I'm for raising the age of purchase of assault weapons from 18 to 21. In most states, you can't buy booze until you're 21. How is it that you can buy an assault-style military weapon when you're just 18 years old, as this knucklehead savage in Parkland, Florida, just 19 years old? Right. He bought that weapon when he was 18. Mm-hmm. But I think you've got to wait until you get some sense of who you are in life. Craig and I didn't have children until we were 35 years old, right?
All right.
35 years old. 36.
Pretty close. But let me ask you. You referenced the deferment and getting married. You allude to the fact that you didn't serve or go to Vietnam, which inspired you in a way to become a war correspondent. Let's
Compelled
talk about
me.
that. And it's spoken about, beautifully in the book.
Well, in the book, to get it, GeraldoShowBook.com, I look back on that Vietnam draft avoidance with deep regret. Why? Because I believe that there were men, in those days it was just men, now it's men and women. There were men who went and died instead of me. And I've been embarrassed, indeed ashamed of that for all those many years. So then when the opportunity came after the 9/11 attacks to be shoulder to shoulder with our GIs in wartime, I seized the opportunity. As I mentioned, leaving my cushy job at NBC to go to work for Fox News as a war correspondent. And to be with those GIs in the forward operating bases. Craig and I did 11 extended assignments in Afghanistan, 11 extended assignments in Iraq, Somalia, you name it. A lot of the adventures that we experienced are depicted here in the memoir. To be with our fighting men and women in combat at those forward operating bases, those outposts in faraway places, to know their courage, to know their selflessness, their sacrifice, to know their loneliness in that way. It's one of the best things about my career as a correspondent, to be with those GIs. You know, now when I walk through an airport, anytime there's someone in uniform, you know, we haven't been in combat since 2012, but anyone who's in a uniform, particularly the, you know, sergeants or above in rank who I know were in service back, you know, before 2012, they say, hello, I was with you in such and such forward operating base. You said hello to my son, you signed an autograph for, you know, my relative. You took a picture with my kid. It's one of the nicest things about my life. It's something I treasure. It's just like the families of the developmentally disabled. They're also like part of my family. And the reaction I have to them and they have to me is one of the most life-affirming, okay, Laura? One of the most life-affirming aspects of my life. I have a woman doing all the heavy lifting with the books here.
Do you know, seeing John Campbell, General John Campbell,
at the book signing party last night,
it reminded me of how we learned a whole different part of our society. You know, people, military families, being with the military families. You know, we left our own families to go in these extended stays, and they had to fend for themselves. But it was at a fraction of what our soldiers and Marines and airmen did. And it was really great to meet all those folks.
Even though I carried a weapon in Afghanistan, to much controversy, secretly, supposedly, to be with those GIs, to watch them. I never carried any weapons when I was with our guys, only when I was not with our guys. To see them, to see those young men and the sacrifice. You know, Afghanistan still goes on. It just doesn't get the attention anymore. You know, Craig, when we were, you know, doing our 22 wartime assignments, everybody was interested in what we were doing. People were totally tuned in. Now, not so much. Now, you hardly can name the war correspondents because the war lasted so long. People have kind of almost tuned out, and that's it's sad because there's still people fighting and dying. You know, we lost two just yesterday. You see that? Yeah. U.S. Special Forces and a British Commando guy on a secret mission to capture an ISIS leader. Yeah. Got killed in Syria.
Well, it's difficult for people to focus on that kind of thing when you have domestic attacks happening, you know, every week. So
just today, look what happened in Silicon Valley. You know, some crazy person killed her boyfriend allegedly. I don't know if we have all the story yet.
Well, they say it was domestic violence, or you know, somebody was jilted and went in. A
jilted lover went into the work at YouTube, right? YouTube in San Bruno
headquarters. Yeah, and it's frightening for all of us that this kind of thing goes on.
That thing in Parkland, the Parkland massacre, was just awful. Parkland, Florida. That was just so awful, so sad.
Put it in perspective. As a question you've seen a lot in the last 50 years working in the industry. Was there a particular decade that stands out most for having the most entertaining, complex, interesting news cycles?
You know, throw me some of those books, please. The decades have been so different. The 70s, from 1970 to 1980, my first decade, anything went. There were no rules in terms of drugs or sex. You know, it was the kids of the 60s were becoming young adults, and everything was permissible. Crazy things happened in the 70s. And then, you know, there was no AIDS in the 70s, or that we knew of anyway. There was no consequence for behavior as a libertine. You could just do basically whatever you wanted. And then came, you know, Ronald Reagan and Just Say No, and the ethos of the 80s was entirely different than it had been for the 1970s. The 80s were much more locked down. Stylistically and musically, the 80s were kind of the lost decade. But it was, you know, like my friend Cheech Marin from Cheech and Chong, in the 80s, they were like in hiding compared to the 70s. And then, you know, so the 80s happened. The 90s were the Gen Xers. And they, you know, I guess my wife, Erica, she's 43. How old is Cordelia? Cordelia's older. She's 50.
She's 50.
She's 50. But the kids of the 90s that was like the talk show era, the 90s.
Should have said her age.
Yeah,
I'm
right.
in
Now you're
trouble.
gonna be in trouble.
And she's 40.
She's 21. That was the 90s. The aughts were defined, I think, by 9/11, when no one knew where that decade was going. When we turned, first of all, the millennium. When we turned the millennium, I remember. You remember how everyone thought all the computers were going to shut off?
Right.
Everyone thought that.
And you were on the international timeline.
Right.
weren't you?
I
You
sailed
brought
my
your
boat.
sailboat?
Right. I sailed my boat around the world.
Right.
And it was in Tonga on the international date line because I wanted to be among the first people in the universe to celebrate the new millennium. But that was the turn of that particular decade. That was a crazy time. Of course, nothing happened.
Right. The day went on.
The day went on. The
Yeah.
computers managed.
Yeah.
And then.
Y2K.
I think that this decade, the second decade of the 21st century, will be defined by Donald Trump.
Yeah. Well, here's another question. Actually, somebody's asking, what was your experience like on Celebrity Apprentice? And you write a lot about Donald Trump in the book. Explain why.
Celebrity Apprentice, I was blessed to be in the final season of Celebrity Apprentice, hosted by Donald Trump, just 2 months before he ran for president of the United States. So it was my good fortune, although I had known him for years. I met him back in 1976, and I've known him ever since and interviewed him probably 30 times. But Celebrity Apprentice, much more intimate relationship developed because I was with him every day for 6 weeks. So I got to know him very well, and he gave me every break. He was so gracious to me and to my family. When I lost to Lisa Gibbons in the finals, he was so nice. My daughter sold, and then just 10 years old. Now she's 12 and a half, a teenager almost. He was so nice to her. And a lot of my feeling toward the president today is informed by how gracious he was to me, by how caring and compassionate, and how close he was to his own family. To see him with Ivanka and the boys, Erica and Don Jr. and Tiffany. And to see him with his grandchildren, Ivanka had little children then, was really, he's just a nice person. He was open-hearted and not a racist. I've seen so many of Trump's properties and hung out with him so often. There's not a racist bone in his body, but it just seems that his language is so intemperate. This decade, that I'm still going on your question of how the decades differed. But this decade that will be defined by Trump. And I don't want to give short shrift to President Obama. The election of President Obama, the first black man in 2008 to serve as President of the United States, the 44th President of the United States, was historic. And to a minority attorney, a civil rights activist, anti-war activist like me, it was like my dream come true when Barack Obama got elected. I don't want to give that event short shrift. But his tenure in office was pretty quiet. He had no major scandals. People say, what about Benghazi? What about Fast and Furious? What about the Hillary's email scandal and all the rest of it? I think that those were largely hyped up. I don't believe that those were. I think that Hillary's Benghazi scandal was probably as important as Trump's Russia collusion. I think there's no collusion. There's an illusion of collusion. And I think Benghazi was a bunch of bull that they try to blame her. And, they succeeded in a large measure of tarnishing her reputation. But still, even though Hillary happened in the second decade of the 21st century, the first woman to run seriously for president as a major party candidate, and even though it was, Barack Obama was, I put Barack Obama in the first decade. So even though if Hillary had been elected, it would have been a whole different vibe, but she wasn't elected. Trump was, and now we're all living with the consequences of that extraordinary election that nobody saw coming.
Do you think Trump saw it coming? Do you think he really believed he would be elected? Or?
I think there is no doubt that, knowing him as I do, that he really believed from day one that he had discovered a path to being a viable candidate and he knew he was betting on himself. There's no doubt about it. People say he must have been shocked that he was elected. I don't buy that. I believe that he believed that he was going to be president.
Was it ego-driven, or did he want to serve?
Well,
what was his motivation?
I am not a shrink, Craig. I can't tell you, but I can tell you that he believes he's the most competent person for the job. I have no doubt, but that the president believes that he should be president. That he can, that the skills that he honed in creating this billions of dollars of wealth and this empire, this real estate empire that he and his family have put together, he believed, that he had conquered the business world, even though he had ups and downs doing it. He believed that he had conquered the business world and that he could be the chief executive of the business known as the United States of America. And now he's doing it, and there's a lot about his presidency that I do not agree with. I mean, now this whole thing with the immigrants and the demonization of the dreamers, the DACA recipients, I certainly don't agree with him on that. I've suggested, I had dinner with him at Mar-a-Lago last month. I suggested a compromise on the dreamers that would. I think what should happen. Not that you asked, but in terms of immigration reform and this contentious issue, if the two sides are serious about a compromise, could you let Ben in? If they're serious about a compromise, then the compromise is this. I think the DREAM Act students should be given their path to citizenship in exchange for Congress funding the border wall. Give President Trump his border wall. Let him get the $25 billion he says they need to build that border wall. In exchange, give the dreamers their path to citizenship. So you get the wall, the president gets his wall, the dreamers get a path to citizenship. I think that would go a long way to removing this contentious issue from the front burner. That is, if the two parties really want a compromise. I'm not entirely convinced, Craig, that they do. I mean, it could be that both sides have made a calculation that it'd be better off to have this issue, this burning issue out there, where it could stir up their respective bases, which I think is really too bad.
Well, that's the big disappointment you're very politically knowledgeable, but I think the disappointment is that how everything is party-driven. It's not necessarily for the good of the country. But here's another good question is, do you think President Trump will be president in 2024?
In 2024? What, about 2020?
Or 2020, for that matter.
I think there is no chance, zero chance, that this president will be impeached. As I said, I think that the whole Russia story is a bunch of baloney. I don't think there was any collusion. If there was any collusion, we would have seen proof of it by now after all these months. I think that Mueller is feeding around the edges. I don't think he's got anything on any key aid. The people that they got, they didn't get for colluding with Russians. They got them for lying under oath or, messing with their taxes like Manafort, just being dishonest people. I think the president will, however annoying the special counsel is, I think President Trump is fine. There is no Russia collusion. I believe him that he's actually correct about that. There is no. How come the lady is so heavy lifting? GeraldoShowBook.com is the website to buy the book. GeraldoShowBook.com. So Trump will be president in 2020. He'll run for re-election. I think the strongest Democrat is the old man governor of California so far. I think Jerry Brown, if he wanted wanted to run for it, I think the Democrats need someone who could stand toe to toe with Donald Trump. Hillary Clinton could not. He ran her into the ground. He's so sharp. He's so barbed. He's so formidable. He senses a person's weak spot and just attacks them in a way that is vicious. Like Little Marco. How he totally destroyed Marco Rubio's candidacy.
Personal attacks.
Or low-energy Jeb Bush. Mm-hmm. You can't look at Jeb Bush now without saying, hey, come on, guys, spark up. And I don't think there's any Democrat on the scene that I know of that can stand toe to toe to. He's like the insult master, Donald Trump. He's very, very formidable candidate. And he's a movie star that people don't realize that, or they don't appreciate. Celebrity Apprentice was 14 seasons, and much of the time it was one of the top-rated shows.
Yeah. The season you were on was one of the highest rated.
Very, very well rated. And it's because, it's no accident, it's because of Donald Trump. He's a very charismatic, very magnetic person. You can hate his politics, but you cannot deny that the man is a star. And it's very difficult for a politician to beat a star. Mm-hmm. He's so glib. He's so intemperate. I mean, my worry is, as president, these tweets are, they're clever. I'm very proud that I'm one of 45 people that the President of the United States follows on his official Twitter account. He's very intemperate, and I wish he'd watch some of his language. I think that, for instance, his feud with Amazon, now Jeff Bezos, to me, to get Amazon to pay taxes, that's a negotiation. You do that in private. You call up, hello, Jeff. Yeah, you guys got to pay sales tax. Okay. Yeah, you have your guy call my guy. Mm-hmm. Let's draft a bill. Amazon's got to pay taxes because you're putting all the brick and mortar mom and pop shops downtown out of business. That's a negotiation. Instead, what the president does is tweet, Bezos is a crook. Amazon's stealing us blind. The United States Postal Service is the delivery boys for Bezos billions. And the stock on the company is down like $60 billion or something like that.
Yeah.
I think it's immature.
And it's not necessarily correct. I understand that taxes are paid usually through vendors and other sources.
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't really researched it, but
it's not entirely correct.
I think that there's no doubt, but that the internet is screwing municipalities, and we have to deal with the new reality.
Right. All right, one more question, and we're going to do something called 22 questions in 2 minutes. And as you can see, Geraldo answered
22showbook.com. GeraldoShowbook.com.
So
to get your signed copy of my new memoir, which was published today, fresh off the presses. It actually has that fresh new smell.
So here is a question I find interesting in its naivete. Are you still close with Roger Ailes? And it's interesting because a reporter actually asked you that, and I think it speaks to how quickly Roger Ailes suddenly disappeared from public view. So you talk about that in the book, and it's a very emotional part of the book.
Roger Ailes was the creative founder of Fox News. He invented Fox News. That was the second time he hired me, Fox News. He hired me first at Rivera Live when he was in charge of that network. I love the guy who was my mentor. He's dead now, so people asking the question should know that Roger Ailes is dead. He left Fox News in July of 2016, disgraced by the sex harassment scandal that I write about in the book. I actually finished the book in June of 2016. The sex harassment scandal at Fox News broke out the next month in July 2016, so I had to rewrite the whole book. But in it, it talks about how Roger was brought low by his alleged treatment of women at Fox News, including, and this is all on the record, so I'm not telling tales out of school, Megyn Kelly, who now works at NBC, and maybe even more famously, Gretchen Carlson, who started it all. She's like the George Washington of the Me Too movement. Roger was a fiery spark plug of a guy. He was an amazing character. He had an explosive temper. I never saw any sex harassment in our day. Roger was an equal opportunity offender. If he liked you, he really liked you. If he didn't like you, he let you know it in no uncertain terms. If he didn't like the way you dressed or the way you looked, what do what is that with that dress? What is that with that suit? Oh my God, that tie, what's wrong? He was very blustery. He was a bully in many ways, aside from being brilliant and creative and cutting to the chase. I mean, he could have taught Donald Trump everything he knows. Roger is a wonderful, wonderful, charismatic person to people that he loved, and he loved me, took good care of me. I lament his passing, but it was my loyalty and my friendship to Roger that kept me from believing the allegations against him until the proof became irrefutable. When Gretchen came up with a tape of his, talking dirty to her, which was too bad. But the only sex harassment.
So hard to discount those accusations.
It's so easy to discount them. The only sex harassment. Remember that guy? We had don't mention her name. We had a young intern who had a full figure, put it that way, and we had a guest in the show at the Fox headquarters who said to her when they were alone, when the intern was alone with this guest, that you should emphasize your sexuality because it was very insulting. He said she had no brain or something like that. She told us. We went after the guy. We ran him out of the building and said, "Don't you ever come back? We'll kick your ass." We were very, very protective of the women. I remember when I was on the wrestling team at West Babylon High School, when a kid would be bullied in our school, the wrestling team and the football players would get together and we'd go after the bully. I never saw all that, that stuff that was later alleged about Fox News and about all those other outfits. It just was something that, I'm sure that many, if not most, of the charges are correct, but it was not something that we saw very much of. And when we did, we dealt with it. Now there's all kinds of sensitivity training and human resources, and any superior now who in any way abuses or is abusive toward a subordinate, that person is gone. 86, they're out the door before the ink is dry. The world has changed. It was a painful process. A lot of good people, generally good people, fell by the wayside. A lot of them were friends of mine. Charlie Rose at CBS, Tavis Smiley at PBS, Matt Lauer at NBC. I couldn't believe the charges against them until you had to believe when they resigned. Bill O'Reilly, after paying all that money in settlements, you don't pay that kind of settlement money unless something awful happened. So I think that the Me Too movement and the sex harassment story is going to be one of the most important stories of this period in history, going back to that whole history, how the decades are changed. I think it will definitely be one of the headlines for this period in our lives.
So let's do something interesting here. GeraldoShowBook.com. You want to get that plug if you want to get your questions asked to Geraldo live.
And you get a signed book.
And the signed book.
First you buy the signed book on GeraldoShowBook.com, and then you get to ask your question. Go ahead.
All right, so 22 questions
in
2 minutes right now.
Okay.
All right, will you be able to do this in 2 minutes?
I don't know. Let's see.
Can you answer one question in 2 minutes?
Yeah.
All right, where were you born?
Right here in New York City, in Beth Israel Hospital, 17th Street and 2nd Avenue.
All right, who do you want to play you in the movie?
Maybe Mario Lopez, the guy from Extra.
Mario Lopez, huh?
Yeah.
He's a good-looking guy.
Yeah.
So what was your first job?
My first job was, I worked with Papa in the kitchen of Republic Aviation Corporation, defense plant on Long Island.
I remember the diner, too.
Right.
What was your greatest accomplishment?
My greatest accomplishment, as I said, was helping lead the crusade that closed the institutions for the developmentally disabled.
And what's your biggest fear?
My biggest fear is ridicule, irrelevance, kind of infirmity and old age, all those classic fears that many baby boomers who may be watching right now are experiencing.
Sure. What's the one thing you need to have in your fridge at all times?
Corona.
I thought you quit.
I did quit drinking today.
That was 5 minutes ago.
No, that party we had for the book last night, I quit after
all right.
that.
So who's the most interesting person you've met recently?
Most interesting person I've met recently?
Maybe on Air Force One or in Puerto Rico? Or...
Yeah, I'd have to say The most interesting person I've met recently. I like the police chief, Manley,
Manley,
in
yeah.
Austin,
He was an
Texas.
impressive
Yeah,
man.
very impressive. And dealing with the that serial bomber who terrorized the Texas Capitol.
Right. How do you take your coffee?
Milk, no sugar.
What's your middle name?
Miguel or Michael.
What's your biggest pet peeve?
My biggest pet peeve is ignorance. People who form an opinion based on no data, they just mouth off, in a way that is very annoying.
What's your favorite hobby?
My favorite hobby, I love sports. I played. We both were athletes in high school, and I got a letter for lacrosse, varsity lacrosse at the University of Arizona. So I'd say sports, but my biggest hobby by far, my passion, is sailing. I sailed my boat around the world, as you may know, then up the Amazon River. Now I have a motorboat right here on the Hudson River that I intend sailing up the river, then through the Erie Canal to Lake Erie, all the way to Cleveland, where I now own a home in Erica, my beautiful wife's hometown.
All right. What's your guilty pleasure?
My guilty pleasure, jelly beans.
Do you have any hidden talents? We know it's not dancing.
You think? I'm a pretty good karaoke singer. I surprise
You have
people.
a pretty good voice.
Yeah, pretty good voice.
And what color is your toothbrush?
Dark blue is my favorite color for anything, whether it's my boat or my toothbrush.
Are you a morning person or a night owl?
I am a night owl, and it's ironic and bitter to me that I work on Fox and Friends and all these morning gigs that we have, getting up at 4 in the morning, 5 in the morning, because I'm much better at 3 in the morning than I am at going to bed at 3 in the morning than waking up at 5 in the morning.
You do amazingly well with little sleep. What's your worst habit?
I think if Erica is to be believed, then I think she's absolutely correct. It's sometimes I talk over her, or because I know the answer, I jump. I don't give people a chance to, and I try to restrain myself in that regard. But I don't want to be that person. I don't want to be that know-it-all. I want to listen, and because it's interesting to see people formulate opinions.
You know, your worst habit to me is asking a question when you're in the middle of a thought, so I have no idea what you're asking the question about.
Yeah. That's because being a stoner.
Yeah. What was the last gift you gave?
I gave Erica and Saul, we were just here in New York. They were just here. They've gone back to Cleveland because Saul had school. I gave them My Fair Lady tickets, Frozen tickets on Broadway, Mean Girls, and the 2 Harry Potters. So my last gift to my wife and my daughter were 5 great Broadway shows.
It was like a 2-day event, wasn't it?
It was Harry Potter was a 2-day event. Yeah.
What's the last album you bought or streamed, downloaded?
Kendrick Lamar, Damn, of course I'm in it.
Damn, Geraldo.
Damn, Geraldo.
What's your favorite thing to cook?
I hate to cook. I was the short order cook at our dad's diner. You know what I like to cook? I like cooking eggs for my daughter.
Yeah.
First of all, it's a flashback to the short order cook days, but I also am highly skilled at flipping eggs without breaking the yolk.
What cause is dear to your heart?
Well, the developmentally disabled is the cause that really resonates with me. We're still very involved. The money I got from Celebrity Apprentice, almost $750,000 we raised, I gave it, Eric and I gave it to create the Family Autism Center in Mineola on Long Island. It's a center where families, having an autistic kid is so much wear and tear on the parents that they're just not given, people don't pay enough attention to the people who are not afflicted by the disability. They work so hard, the parents do, so that cause is near and dear to my heart. But all the schools I went to, Brooklyn Law School has the Geraldo Lounge. University of Arizona, where your daughter Olivia goes to school,
Right.
has the Geraldo Park.
That's
know,
right.
So I love giving
She's
back.
that all the time. It's right across from her sorority.
Right.
Name anything on your bucket list, if there's anything left.
Well, that's interesting. It's to discover the Great Lakes. I've never really spent time at sea on fresh water. I want to be in the Great Lakes, the largest body of fresh water on planet Earth. I want to sail the Great Lakes, all of them, and then if I'm still alive, go down the Mississippi River. Leave the Great Lakes and go down to New Orleans.
Well, here's an interesting last question. Where do you want to go that you've never been?
Well,
Mars?
yeah, I always wanted to go to space. I love space. Space was my, that's why I love all those Star Trek,
Yeah,
Star
we
Wars
talked about
movies. I've always wanted to be, I tried hard to be the first journalist in space, but then that was the Challenger disaster, so they scrapped the program. I wouldn't have been selected anyway in 1986. It was, the disaster was January 1986, but I wanted very much to go to space. Go to Normandy and the French coast, D-Day, the landing zone in Europe. Going to meet the girls. They're going to go. I'm sending them to Paris, so I'm going to meet them in Normandy. I'm going to go there. I want to do the. I also want to do the European rivers, the Danube, the Rhine. Go cruising those rivers. If not on my boat, then on one of those old cruise ships that they have now, the river boats they have now.
All right, so let's remind people one more time. You buy the book at GeraldoShowBook.com. GeraldoShowBook.com, and we'll take your question with one last question. Of all of your books, which has been the hardest to write?
This is my 8th book. Exposing Myself was the only real bestseller of the books I've written. The immigration books were very fraught with controversy, but this book is the hardest. And the reason it's the hardest is that, I finished it. I had the whole book written, and it started with the scene with Roger Ailes, and I wrote it glowingly about people who later were revealed to be alleged monsters. And so it was like writing this book, and with Trump's ascendancy to the presidency, was like writing this book on a foundation of sand. Every time I thought I was done, something would change with the narrative, and I had to rewrite it. I think the miracle now is, considering that this book was basically finished in January, February of this year, is that it's held up pretty well. I mean, there's been things that have happened, obviously, the Austin bomber, the Parkland school massacre, but I got Hurricane Maria, and going down there, Ben, our cameraman, had just came in because we're going to do a hit for the Hannity show live at 9 o'clock Eastern time here. We were together, the three of us, in Puerto Rico for Hurricane Maria, where not only did we have this huge tragedy that we were seeing unfold, but our own family members were deeply affected by it. We brought generators to Aunt Ellie, remember, and to cousin Sonia.
Yeah.
That was it was so what's the word, disorienting, let's say, being at the scene of a natural disaster that victimized our own family. So there we are as reporters, telling people what's going on and urging the president to come down with aid and all the rest of it. At the same time, we were trying to get gasoline for our relatives to run the generator. So that was quite.
It was
quite a
rewarding
challenge.
too. The fact that we could be there and then help out our family. Well, I think we could wrap it up, Geraldo. GeraldoShowBook.com.
That was a fast
quick hour. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. And this is the last book. Okay. Thank you very much for watching.